All right, Paul. I'm not going to be corny and see how many times I can play off the word tax, because it would be very taxing.
I know. I don't. Let's just not go there yet.
Just
okay.
leave it.
Yeah. Let's just leave it. It's,
all right.
Yeah. It's just it's something. What it and death. That's what they say. But if it came out in different ways, maybe people wouldn't think about them that much. But it's the price we pay for being part of a society.
It's the price we pay for being able to drive down Route 66 without falling in a ditch.
I know that's one. There's many ways we can go
many
into
others.
This. Anyway, this past weekend, we're in that that time of year as we're the next big kind of political event, news event, are our school budget and school board votes that take place towards the end of May.
Yes.
There's a lot of attention right now down in Washington, in Albany. We've gotten through the budget process, and there's a lot of attention now to some of the things that were unresolved in that budget process. Most importantly, casino gambling, which doesn't affect us directly up here, but does affect us, on a statewide basis. On a very local level, we're dealing with a lot of larger planning issues right now. There's some now that the village elections are over. There's been some finalization of how things are going to look for the coming year and 2-year spans. In Catskill, Vincent Seeley won his 10th term as village president, or that was elected by the rest of the board there. In Valatia, the new supervisor there decided to take a cut in pay.
Yes.
Diane Argyle, the new village mayor, and several of the board of trustees decided not to take any raises as well. So, there's little changes going on there, but the big thing that's going on in terms of the political and governmental sphere has to do with kind of planning issues, larger issues, and on a school basis, we're starting to finalize the budgets that are going to be presented next month. And the really big thing is that next week on pretty much across the board on April 22nd is when the school board petitions are going to be due, and we'll have a clear view after that of who's running for what in which school districts around our area. Even though it was quite chilly over the weekend, and the ski areas over in Greene County and Ulster and Delaware counties got one last weekend in some cases and day in other cases of skiing in. Little League started up in a lot of areas around here. In Catskill, where I'm based, they had their parade at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning.
Oh, we missed the Little League parade.
Well, I was there. We've got some little recordings of it if you need it at some point. But it was a nice event. There were some one of the fields was too muddy to play on. There's new management in place over there, so there was some confusion as to who was supposed to be playing whom, where, and the kids, you couldn't see all their uniforms because a lot of them had to wear jackets to keep from shivering so much. There was some disappointment in games. I watched a game with a certain son of mine playing, and the difficulty arose where the other team's coaches, who also do the umpiring, were playing really rough on the kids, whereas a lot of times, especially in the lower leagues and in Little League, they let, if somebody comes in really close, they let them through. And, that created some consternation amongst parents, like, how tough do you want to play, coach? And, so it's that season. And we're going to see that starting up all around. We forget how big a part of local communities this is up here. We can get... we can concentrate on school boards, we can concentrate on federal issues, gun control, etc. But then when you see 600 kids walking down a back neighborhood street to their Little League ball field on an early Saturday morning, you realize, okay, that's where the town town's heart lies. in
And
many
parents, dear parents, I love you so much. As a father of adult children and a grandfather of children who are now playing kid basketball, we're the ones who have to behave ourselves at the games.
Yes,
Because
yes.
the children, they're having fun. But I'll tell you.
Yeah. The kids kind of go, "What do you mean?
Yeah,
What's the score?"
yeah, right. So take it easy this summer. If you're one of those parents, take some medication before the game. Let the children play.
Yeah.
Okay, they're out there having fun, and usually the person who misbehaves is an adult.
Right. Yeah, and often it comes down to actually the coaches. You know, in a lot of
I know. It
situations.
just they get seriously emotional.
There is, going back to the whole idea of education around here. There's a couple interesting things on the kind of larger community sphere. One is that there's a piece that's coming out through the Associated Press of late about several dozen states now looking for an alternative to the GED high school equivalency test because of concerns that the new test, the new version, is getting to be too expensive. That's a real question if we can't afford high school equivalency. I mean,
unbelievable.
Yeah, where does that's the battle that we're having between public-private, and when private becomes too expensive, how far can you tax public, and how far can the public go and say, okay, are we going to give up all these things that we like to have as part of our society because we can't afford them anymore? If we can't afford the things that are essential to life, then maybe something's skewed with our fiscal system. I don't know. It's an interesting quandary. Other thing that came up, there was an education summit last week hosted by State Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin, and you had a lot of teachers questioning mandates, both the budget, the 2% tax cap, and what's that's doing to the quality of education. And you've also had a lot of questions going on around just how far you can go in terms of mandating tests. At the same time, you've got parents now saying that the new tests that are going to be implemented this coming year are too strict for both math and for language arts. And so this is our democracy at work, though, is just whenever there's a shift of any sort, everybody questions it. Do we want to lower the standards and be more affordable? Do we want to strive for something greater? Big questions, and they all. It's good that it comes out this time of year because it also coincides with the this process we're in right now of deciding on a community basis what our school budgets are going to be for the coming year and who are going to be our representatives on our school boards. Some other things going. And one last thing in terms of education around here, there was a little back and forth that came up in the Catskill Central School District last week, where the Catskill Teachers Association went on record saying that there was discipline problems on a district-wide basis that they were having to deal with. The superintendent of schools, Kathleen Farrell, shot right back and said, "Nope, there is no discipline problem." So, there you have two sides. You have differences and things.
Well, I'm afraid there's a little story about drinking in the parking lot there.
That was. I didn't even want to report on that one because it came down to one kid who was, I think, arrested after the fact for having snuck a drink as a 17-year-old at a party, and it's just, I don't know. There's something about retroactive social law, violations that are difficult. There's some other things going on the planning field around here. There's, on a statewide basis, there's a lot of talk right now about setting up for the future in terms of electric cars and setting up those charging stations think there was about 360 of them that were going to go up. It was interesting being in Europe recently and seeing how there are these charging stations all over the place in cities. It used to be there'd be these little mini gas stations, like just a pump on a side of a street, but they're being replaced right now with these electric stations. And what's resulted is that with smaller cars in the cities, there's more for parking. The difficulty is that it means more parking and more congestion at the same time. Some things going on around here. The town of Ankrum here in Columbia counties, they're talking a lot about, somehow provoking a revival in their township. And, it's a very rural place, but it's got a great sense of pride. Claverack, as has been up on our newsroom blog at wgxc.org, the town of Claverack is reviewing a big electric fusion concert that's coming in mid-August, trying to see how to mitigate that when it comes in. And then there's been a lot of talk recently about I think it was about $5.1 million in farm investments that have come through to I think it was 5 Columbia County farms and 2 or 3 in Dutchess County, that the money's coming in to help them survive and open up easements on a perpetual basis, a sustainable basis, to allow for the maintenance of our agricultural traditions and landscape in this area. So those are all bigger efforts that are underway. The Columbia County Economic Development Corporation, which is known as CEDC, recently approved support from 2 expanding from their microloan program to 2 local businesses. Their money's going $35,000 to a company called Dirtworks in Germantown, and then $15,000 to McDarris Fine Art here in Hudson. And Ken Flood, who's the director of the corporation, and giving out those grants, was talking about how the economy is continuing to recover, and this is a sign of that. And that's something that we've been talking about here for quite some time. And just it's going to be interesting now as that recovery starts to really take hold, and we see it evolve into more job opportunities or small grants or things that help the quality of life in our local communities. It's going to lead to even more on the planning circuit, both for local towns and another effort thing that we noticed. There's a big story in the Catskill Daily Mail today about Nina Slansky, who's kind of a new resident of the town of Catskill, who's working with this ad hoc group called the Catskill Action Team that we've referenced several times here. And she's has created an advertising campaign for the village of Catskill to kind of push it forward. This action team is meeting on a weekly basis. They've got lots of ideas. You can tell they're having some success, and they're being taken seriously, because there's also right now starting to be some blowback against them from the more local community. Like, do we want change, and who are these people? And that happens. That happens here in Hudson. That happens all throughout.
That happens
the area.
everywhere.
The one thing that they've created so far, they have a new website. It's catskillthevillage.com. Urge you all to go up and take a look at it. And some of these new ideas that are coming up there are landing on that page. So some other things going on around the greater area. The state's urging county officials to return wireless surcharge funds. This is a battle that's been, it's, as everybody fights over the little bits of money. I mean, that's very similar to what we've noticed in recent weeks, where county prosecution departments are going after welfare fraud and kind of minor social crimes, as it were, on a greater basis. And it all comes down to filling those coffers for new projects,
right,
as it were. The other thing that it hasn't hit up here yet, but it's going on in townships on a county level lower down the Hudson Valley, is that there's starting to be some blowback and questioning of this big Central Hudson merger into the large Canadian company Fortis. And there was tied into that merger, the state public services authority was insisting that Fortis provide more funds for public projects. But what's happening now is that a lot of towns and municipal and county leaders are saying, do we really want this large entity controlling our, such an integral part of our power grid up here? And it's not electrical as much as it's our heating systems. And Central Hudson over the past 2 years has been pretty good through Sandy and Irene, better than some of the other larger companies in this arena around. But the worry is that with the company becoming even bigger, they'll lose that sense of local oversight and responsiveness, in the merger. So that's a big thing that's on the horizon. Speaking of mergers, there's also some review going on a county basis over the proposed merger of the Columbia County Youth Bureau into the County Department of Social Services. What's going to be lost by that, becoming part of a larger entity. And this was a conversation that started a while back when there was talk of combining youth center and senior center, which is one of those proposals that sounds both very logical and very illogical at the same time, which goes a long way to explaining what I was trying to explain to a 7-year-old, and actually listening to Paul Greene, the guy from School of Rock, trying to explain to a whole classroom of kids learning how to play rock and roll music, explain what a paradox is. Now, there's a good explanation of a paradox. Speaking of paradoxes, this past week saw the return of SamPratt.com. One of our great local blogs did a marvelous piece that's up there now about winners of the Crystal Apple Award, which is the Columbia County Chamber of Commerce's annual kind of recognition award to a local up-and-coming business. And starting with the example of Local Ocean, which we were talking about last week.
Yeah, we talked about them last week.
He goes even farther to show the track record over there and what's happened. And it seems that 1 in 5 of the companies that have been recognized with the Crystal Apple have gone under.
Oh.
And, there's all sorts of difficulties. And it just... it's not so much a tit for tat story as an indicator that sometimes our enthusiasm can blind us to the realities of the situation at hand. And one of the jobs that we take on in the Fourth Estate as journalists and as media people, such as we are here at WGXC, is to see clearly, to try to see clearly, so that it's not bad when something fails. We have to be able to accept that not everything is going to succeed, that unfortunately the flip side of competition is that only one entity wins.
That's correct.
But if we can prepare for that and plan better, we can not suffer either the depression that occurs after losing unexpectedly, or the repercussions and the ripples that come off of such failure. Some other things out there. The down in Washington, the whole farm worker, immigrant farm worker, and farm workers in general are coming into the debate about immigration right now. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's been introduced into the talks, but all details are withheld for now.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that nice? It's kind of perfect for a show like this, but there was a lot of talk here in Hudson last week when the legendary Iron Horse Bar right down the street from us here, which a friend of mine once noted it may be one of the only such establishments in the nation where you can have a beer, step outside, and get hit by a train. It was closed one day by the workman's compensation, then reopened the next day, and turns out it had to do with false charges. So,
well, you can walk out and get hit by a train. There's no question about that.
Yep, yeah, it's like a couple yards.
I've never tried it, but
no, I didn't. We urge no one to really try that one. And then, kind of coming back to one of our favorite subjects this year, we see that the town of Kinderhook voted against the SAFE Act last week, and on the gun control thing, there was a rally, a number of rallies, 5 of them around the state. Last weekend by a new entity that's come forth calling themselves New York Revolution, and they had 5 statewide peaceful rallies saying it's time to put feet to the ground and getting really serious about this. And one of their rallies was in Catskill, where local Assemblyman Pete Lopez showed up and addressed the crowd. Our congressman was up. Chris Gibson was up in Delhi in Delaware County. From the pictures, it looks like it's a sizable amount. All men, pretty much. Maybe 20, 30 people in each of these, and they're just they've latched onto this. The whole idea of gun control. If you've been watching online, reading the comments around, the Sandy Hook parents and the vigils they're doing, there's a lot of nasty comments about them right now. Who are these freeloaders? And it just, we were talking a couple weeks ago, there was some report that came up about how as a nation, I heard this here on WGXC. There was somebody talking about how as a nation we may be losing our ability to empathize, our ability to have compassion, and it's because of the amount of time we're spending online and in front of TVs, and we're just not communicating that well. And this is sort of an indication of that. Kind of an offshoot of that, there was a piece in the Register Star last week about a former state trooper addressing the Chatham Town Board about the idea of sustainability. Now, this is we were talking a year ago about this whole Tea Party agenda now has shifted. Before the SAFE Act and gun control came in, they were shifting towards what is called Agenda 21, which is that United Nations idea that came up in, I think it was in the early 90s. It was during the first Bush presidency, and it was a United Nations conference about how to address global wealth inequity and other problems on a long-term basis to quell war, to quell massive starvation and other huge endemic problems. And that's where the idea of sustainability first started gaining hold. Well, this John Wallace, a former state trooper, came forth to question the whole idea of sustainability, to bring up this whole Agenda 21 thing and to promote this group that he's part of around here, which has been around since uh, since the early 90s, mid 90s, it's called Oath Keepers, and their whole idea is to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And, it's that foreign and domestic that, makes it kind of a little bit questionable, because it's looking for enemies as much as it's looking to defend an idea. The other thing about both the Oath Keepers and this whole new New York Revolution push against the SAFE Act is that they're immediately targeting Cecilia Katchik, who was in Catskill last week, and all Democrats. So it's very political. It's very political, and watch that one. Let's see how it grows this year and whether it becomes something during the midterms in 2014. My suspicion is that it was one thing with the midterms in 2010, and the Tea Party, latched on to some real fundamental rights and worries about taxation at a time when the economy was in a real rough spot. This time, it may just look like more angry white guys. I don't know. I mean, it's something to pay attention to. Just a note out, the town of Claremont's doing a reassessment. We're going to start to see over the coming years there'll be a lot of revaluations and reassessments. It's not something that towns like to do, but they have to keep things fair. And the thing about a recession and the sort of difficult economic times we've come through is that people hold off on that for a period of time until people can take change in their economic status, and that's going to come back into view. Finally, there was a home I noticed up on Watershed Post that there was a home up in the Catskills that was closed up, and the family made homeless. They've been moved into a hotel down in Kingston because of mold. So watch out as things warm up. You're going to find out where there was some dripping in your house over the winter months, and what it has produced in the months since. Looking back into history, kind of on Wikipedia and other different useful tools of the internet, it was on this day way back that Samuel Johnson published his first dictionary. And, I was listening over the radio this weekend and realized that it was this past weekend in history that Daniel Webster published his first American dictionary. And the reason he did it was, according to Garrison Keillor, was because Americans were notoriously bad at spelling and had this way of saying that whatever their idea of how a word was spelled was right, and they would fight over that. They would fight over their right to spell badly, and so Webster produced this book that was so expensive nobody bought it. Unfortunately, I just kind of wonder, what is it about this time of year that brings both tax day and dictionaries? It was on this day in 1802 that the British poet William Wordsworth and his sister saw what he called a long belt of daffodils, and that inspired the famous poem "I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud." It was also on this date in 1865 that Abraham Lincoln died of a gunshot wound, our first assassination in the presidency. In 1892, the General Electric Company was formed, and in 1912, the Titanic went to the bottom of the big drink.
Bloop, 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 bloop.
A few other things. 1923, which seems quite recent, and only 90 years ago, is when insulin first became generally available for people with diabetes, which, I think before that it was just something weird, just a sickliness that occurred. Going back in history, you had the great Bessie Smith, the difficult American author Henry James was born on this day in 1843. Maybe this is the year I'll finally tackle him. Leonardo da Vinci was born on this day. Emma Thompson, the great English actress. Roy Clark. You remember that name?
Yeah, I do.
Hee-haw.
Yes, that's right. Right, that's right.
We need say no
Oi,
more.
oi.
Okay.
That's it.
And then two musicians. I noted there's Dave Edmonds, who's kind of a rockabilly sort of musician, Welsh originally, very talented. Eventually, he showed up for a while in a group called Rockpile. That's for those that know Rockpile, very beloved band. And then there's Mike Chapman, who is a songwriter and producer who produced a whole bunch of kind of power pop music in this 1970s in Britain that was really popular in Britain. And then he went on and achieved his greatest success producing Blondie's big hits and The Knack, My Sharona. So that's our April 15th, which, yes, you can mention that other name now. That other word, taxes.
It is tax day, and have a good time. This is what you got to do. It's at one point I decided not to pay taxes, but it didn't go over too well. Dave Edmonds is the birthday the birthday boy that we're talking about. His big hit was called Girl Talk. And then let's look at Rhythm and Blues from 1955. A very, very, very good year.